Hello everyone and welcome, TMM here. I'm making a tutorial videos series on how to make a law-friendly GTA 4 car from scratch. As always, put on your own favorite music and enjoy. Today, in the second part of the series, we will start modeling basic car mesh. Anyways, before we start, I'll mention a few things that are relevant. Number 1. As I have mentioned before, the car doesn't have to be 100% perfect from the blueprint. As we're not actually making the real car here, we're making a law-friendly car. There are gonna be changes. Number 2. As we're not making the real car, you could actually make a car for other games like GTA San Andreas, like for my previous tutorial series. Then use that as a blueprint for this GTA 4 model as well, which is basically what I'll be using for this tutorial. Making cars for GTA San Andreas is easier, as when you can change the design mid-project, it's much easier to do there. And also, having the design finalized will make this project much easier. Number 3. As a project will take much longer than the one for GTA San Andreas, I won't be including all the footage for my own car, otherwise maybe the videos could be like 8 times longer, I don't know, it's many times longer. Instead, I'll be using the most important footage with other clips where I include some information or tips and tricks. I'll give a summary of each segment as I make the car. Number 4. Remember to save your file very often, as who knows if something goes wrong with your computer while you're working. To quickly save your work, just simply press Ctrl S. Also, if you reach a milestone or you're going to make a big irreversible change, just save to a separate file, like we did on the last video. Well, after we finished lining up our blueprints, we actually saved to the second file. Like, I do personally use the number system, like I start from 0001 and so on. Number 5. If you get stuck on something while you're modeling and you need some references on how the model is made, you can actually use OpenIV and navigate to a vehicles.img. Take a look at some cars that are similar to what you're making. Whether they are vanilla or law-friendly mods, they will both be fine. This requires some prior 3D modeling experience, since I won't be diving into the most basics of things in the videos. So I would recommend watching these guides that I'll link in the top right corner, a great beginner tutorial by the way, which are basically basic car making guides. And maybe you could try your hand at GTA San Andreas before this as well, also linked up there in the top right corner. Also, you could actually just start with something simple like a boxy and more simple shaped car, like I did with my first GTA 4 mod, Willard, Idaho, which is a 70s Malays era American boxy car. And needless to say, I'm also a beginner myself. I still have a lot to learn in terms of 3D modeling, so I'm sharing as much as I currently know. And by the way, if any of you guys are 3D modeling experts, if you guys are watching, feel free to give me some criticism and advices. That would be greatly appreciated. And so, let's get started. So on the last video where we lined up our blueprints, I used a real 1992 Pontiac Grand Am picture as a blueprint. However, as you can see here, I'm actually using my GTA San Andreas version of the Pontiac Cypress now, which the designs are originally taken from my previous video, although I did make quite a few changes to the design as well, which by the way, the mod is available on my workshop. You can go to the description to check it out. Available now for San Andreas. Now to start, delete the box that we previously used to line up the blueprint. You can do so by selecting the box in object mode, press X and click delete. Now, just click on an empty space, press Shift A and select plane. Scale down the plane from the top view to match the size of the roof to the edge of the doors. After that, go to the right bar, click on this blue wrench icon, go to Add Modifier, Mirror. Keep the settings as they are, since this is exactly what we want. After we add the modifier, go to the top view, select the 2 vertices on the left, which is the passenger side. Turn on snap using the magnet icon on the top, and use increment, and also turn on the absolute grid snap. Then move the vertices along the x-axis to the middle of the screen, where they will snap on the green line. Now remember to turn off this snap tool while you're not using it. Snap tool is a very useful tool, but if it's not turned off, you might accidentally snap into wrong places, which could mess up your work. Now change the shading option to something reflective. Personally, I use madcap mode and use a ceramic light bulb, but anything reflective here is fine. Also, turn on the back face culling as well. After we have the shading settings set up, just go to the side view, move all the vertices up to the roof, to the top of the roof, then go to top view, create a loop cut roughly where the front door ends, which is basically between the front and rear door on a 4-door car, and move the outer vertices up to the edges of the roof, and then move the inner vertices along the y-axis to the front and rear ends of the roof. If you want to extend your mesh, press E to extrude your mesh, like I did here, where I extruded the mesh along the y-axis to the rear window. Currently, the roof itself is quite flat and blocky, so we can make it curvier by adding some loop cuts. We'll start by adding along the x-axis first. Remember that you can create multiple cuts at the same time using the scroll wheel. As you add the loop cuts, use vertex slide and move tool to match its shape as you go. Add the loop cuts where there are things that separate sections, like this rear vent window right here. After you finish adding those loop cuts, go to the side view and select each rows of vertices. Move them up or down to the top of the roof edges, using the inner vertex as a measure. Do this from front to rear. Now that you have all of that done, go to the front view and select the outer row of vertices and do the same thing. Just move it down or up, depending on your car, to match the shape of the roof. Now add some loop cuts along the y-axis. Usually 3 or 4 is fine for GTA 4, but it depends on what type of car you're making. Don't forget to line up the vertices as well. Use the move tool and vertex slide to get the shape right. Basically, any progress from here on, when you create mesh or use loop cuts, make sure to always align the vertices to the shape of the body. Also, make sure to keep the car full of quads as much as possible. Only use tries when necessary, and never use end guns. They will cause issues. If you eventually create like some end guns, make sure to convert them to tries or quads, preferably quads. Moving on to the rear pillar, or the C pillar, we can start by extruding with the outer row of the vertices outwards to where it meets the side windows. Align the vertices, and then we add 1 or 2 loop cuts along the y-axis to make it smoother. Once you're done, select all the vertices that are at the top of the rear pillar. Mine is like 3 or 4 at the back here. Extrude to the side and align the vertices to the bottom edges of the pillar using all those front, rear, side, top views, all the orthographic views. Then add the loop cuts along the y-axis. The amount of loops again depends on what you're making. After that, just align the shape with your blueprint along the multiple views, as I said. Now, moving on to the trunk. Extrude the vertices from the roof down to the bottom of the rear window. Align the shape. And then extrude to the back of the car again, adding loop cuts as we go. Do the same process until you reach the top of the rear bumper. Now for the rear bumper, the same process basically applies. Use extrude, loop cuts and move tools as needed. Once you reach the bottom of the bumper, it's time to extend the bumper to the side. Now this procedure really depends on what type of car you're making, what kind of bumper it has. For the car I'm making, the bumper just curves and still has the same shape from top to bottom. So the way I proceed here is select the outermost row and extrude out to the side of the car, then rotate from the Z-axis by 270 degrees, and then add loop cuts to make it curvy. And then extrude towards the doors, but don't leave a hole for the rear view arch just yet. Then, to create the rear quarter panel, simply connect the trunk and rear pillar to the newly created bumper. This will leave a gap on the corner. The way this corner gap is filled varies quite heavily. It depends on what car you're making. If you need an example, just look around in vehicles on IMG with OpenIV like I mentioned before. For a curved rear car like what I'm making, I usually just connect the side and rear with quads, and then add loop cuts to make it smoother, and then fill the holes with tries. However, once the holes are filled, try to reduce the amount of tries as much as possible. As you can see at the top, I managed to turn all the tries on my car into quads using the vertex slide and knife tools. Now to create the door, extend the rear quarter panel's front birds to create the rear passenger doors. As you extend it to the front passenger doors, keep adjusting the vertices to match the car shape. I would also recommend making a cut where the door ends as well, like I did here, where it ends on the rear view arch. As the door shape is in place, create more notable cuts, like below the edge of the rear vent window and the side mirror. After that, add a few more loop cuts to the doors, preferably to match the amount of cuts on the roof, but not too many cuts, as a window glass doesn't actually have to match the amount of cuts on both the doors and the roof. Adding the A pillar is pretty much the same process as the rear pillar. Just connect the roof to the front door and then use a few loop cuts to get the shape smoother. The creation of the front quarter panel is pretty simple as well. Just extend the door frontward and add loops again. And just like the rear quarter panel, don't leave the hole for the rear arch just yet. Now, I made a bit of a mistake in that I made the car a little bit too detailed for the game. So here's a tip if you feel like the mesh you created is too high quality. The way I reduce the quality like I did here is by removing the rows of quads I deem too detailed. And then I add a quad at the one end. After I add that quad, select the two vertices that continues into the gap I created. And then I just spam F and it creates face as I go. If it looks wrong, just edit it with your hand and keep doing it. You can utilize this trick with using the loop cut as well. Let's say you want to decrease the quality but still want to preserve the curviness a little bit. Just create a loop cut first and then do the aforementioned trick. Now onto the hood, which once again is the same procedure as making the trunk, but forward instead of backwards. Extend the mesh frontwards until it reaches the end of the hood. Create more loop cuts to match the front quarter panel and connect them together. Snap tool is very useful in this process, so use it to save some time. And then extend the hood to reach the queue and headlights. Add some more cuts to adjust the shape. Now, as for the front bumper, once again, creating the front bumper is the exact same procedure as the rear one. Just extend and use some loop cuts and then use slide tool, move tool, get the shape right, basically. And then the rest of the front, like the grill and the lights, again, just fill out the gaps, just like the rear one, try to reduce the amount of tries as much as possible. So now, after we created our basic mesh, we have the basic shape of the car, as seen here, which by the way actually took me like 2.5 hours to get to this point. And anyways, the next video we will start adding details to the mesh we created. As we go, I'll mention more information on the features that I've found on vanilla GTA 4 cars, so that you can gear your car up to more GTA 4 style. I hope this video is informative to everyone who watched. Remember to take frequent breaks when you keep working on the car, by the way. It can be really tiring. It takes a while. If this video was helpful, please consider like and subscribing to my channel, which is currently related to GTA modding. If there's any questions regarding this tutorial, please leave them in the comments. Also check out my workshop. I have just recently rearranged some stuff. Now it looks a little bit better. Check out the new vehicles that came out this year. The Elegant, the completely revamped Cavallo from 2019 that I updated to today's standards, and the Cypress, which is basically what we're making here, but this is for San Andreas, as I mentioned before. So check it out in the description. That's it for this episode. So see you guys later on the next video. Thanks everyone.